Much better.
Alright, here we go. Stephen. Okay, without further ado, Stephen, the Savage Corliss. Good morning, everybody. Yeah. So, 50 people here, all dying to hear what you have to say.
That's fantastic.
Can you hear me okay?
I can, yes.
Okay. And we're just going to run by the questions. We agreed to I'm going to give you all the questions, you're just going to fill in. And then if somebody has something to say, you can just ask me. And at the end, we have some people who want to ask you something. Just come up to the mic and say hello. Yeah?
Sounds great.
Okay, so we have a lot of people here. Some people here are long-time investors in cryptocurrency, but there are also people here who never heard of Ethos before today. So I thought let's just start off with some general information. Can you tell us a bit about yourself, your history, and what made you get into crypto?
Oh, sure. I don't know. Hopefully it's not too boring for you. I've been in the financial space really since I left school. So I've been in this space for almost 30 years in total. When I left BlackRock back in 2012, and when I was there, I built and ran their sell side business movements. So it was pretty much their global trading book. But I decided to, in 2012, decided that 25, 26 years in that space, it was time to move on. I really felt that the industry itself was really lacking true innovation when it came to capital markets and finance. So really been in crypto ever since I left. So very early days, and it's been very interesting to see how it's matured over the last 5 years. But it's still in a very, very early stage where I think a lot of our peers are still probably trying to struggle to find their way. And I think the trend that I see that I don't necessarily like is and I think Chico mentioned the other thing as well, is that in this space, I think what a lot of people have become are taking a template that exists in the traditional space and really just moving it over and using it in our industry. And I think that's, to me, it's a problem because really kind of the issues I see with kind of the existing structure is that it really didn't work. It's very outdated. So for us here, our main mission is to really rethink how all of this should work. And give you a little more history about myself. I've spent almost all of my time kind of on the institutional side of things, which is very different than retail. The experience from a customer standpoint is far superior than it is for retail. So for me, what I'm trying to do here, we're trying to do here, to apply what really, what kind of this exclusive club has available to it for products and services and costs, and really shift it over and move it to the retail space. And it sounds much more simpler than it is, but it's what excites me, because I know there's a better, more healthier way for us as citizens and as consumers and investors to really experience the process. And the process that exists today is just feeling across many different levels. So the most important thing to me is to change that. So.
Okay, awesome, Stephen. Hey, I'm gonna check do audio check here. 1 minute, okay?
Okay.
Kan iedereen zo goed horen? We hadden net even wat feedback, dus maar de microfoon kan ik uitzetten. Zoals het iets aan aanzetten? Duidelijk, staat ik denk dat hij net even de microfoon moet pakken. Dus, ging het beter? Ja. Ja. Can you say something, Stephen?
Hello?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's good.
Yeah, okay, it's okay. Hey, so, cool. Can you talk about, you said you come from the institutional side of things. Can you say a little bit something about the blockchain and why it's so revolutionary and what's it going to change?
From a very simplistic perspective, right? It's really about the openness and transparency. That to me is absolutely critical, right? I've seen how, like I said, capital markets work, right? And I see how information flows from private, from private institutions to the government and vice versa. So how a lot of these things work are really problematic from my standpoint. There's so much information going on, and for me, as just a normal citizen and as an investor, what I really seek is before I make a decision, or pretty much every decision I make, is I really need information, and I want it to be clean. I don't want it to be cleansed, because typically during a cleansing process, what is real tends to get distorted. So as a very rational investor, which I am, it's kind of seeing the information in its raw form, to me, is something I can trust much more than the type of information we see today. So I think from that standpoint, just simply from the transparency standpoint, I think that is highly critical. But then from the perspective of a firm in the space, or especially a regulator, where I see the opportunity, and I've mentioned this a couple times before, I believe actually globally the way regulators are responding is actually very positive for us as an industry, because they could have, if they chose, come out very aggressively and really kind of halted innovation as in its very early days from a crypto standpoint. And they really haven't done that. And to me, that's a very important signal, because let's be honest, if they wanted to stop it, they could. But I think they being regulators, see the opportunity that it brings, especially around transparency, which we all know is a problem today, right? So regulators are there to protect each one of us, so that is their main mission. I see that as a very positive thing for them and for us, where the blockchain will really kind of transform us from this where we are today, which is in a lot of ways very opaque, very non-transparent structure, and that's problematic for many different reasons. But for me, again, it's very much about the transparency, and it's very much around how do you redesign this industry and others with the blockchain. And I think the opportunity in front of us today, go back to what I said a few minutes ago, where it would be very unfortunate if all we do is move the current models and design from their non-digital form to a digital form. It just doesn't make any sense. It's a massive lost opportunity. So it's imperative that we maintain our drive for real innovation, for real change, which is really where this movement started out years ago. So for us here, it's very much about making sure that we don't miss out on this really once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to really rethink how capital markets work, rethink how finance from a broad perspective works, and to make sure that at the end of this, that what is left is something that is very inclusive, but also something that is very much aligned with social values. And a lot of people use kind of that phrase very, very loosely. But to me and to Shingo and the rest of the team, when we think about social values and how that should align to finance and capital markets, it's one where you really have to take the existing model and turn it upside down and really kind of start over. So for us, it's very much thinking about how do you do that in a way where the benefits are really transfer from intermediaries and large firms to everyone sitting in that room there, or my family here, and everyone elsewhere. So
the most important thing is to kind of rethink everything, redesign it. Don't miss out on this once in a lifetime opportunity to really change kind of a very, very outdated model. So that's what gets me up very early in the morning. That's what keeps me up very late at night, because I'm excited about the opportunity. And I think we have the right model and solution to really kind of begin to recognize the true value of blockchain and crypto.
Sounds awesome, Stephen. Do you also think that's one of the biggest problems that cryptocurrency is facing right now, is that they just pick the keyword model and just digitize it, or just make a coin and just move on from an existing system?
Yeah, I think it's also, I think, as kind of entrepreneurs, right, what we tend to do is we may have an innovative idea, but then what we often do is take that innovative idea and then consult others who tell us how we have to implement that, meaning the legal structure that we build it on, so on and so forth. And I think that's where I see a major problem, because when I look at a lot of the firms that are out there today, even the bigger ones that exist in our space, from my standpoint, it is very, very obvious that, what may have started as a really innovative business really kind of transformed into what I see as a very stale, very kind of non-exciting business. And it's really driven by kind of the way, not necessarily the legal space broadly, right? But I think, in finance especially, everyone tries to put a round peg in a square hole, right? It just doesn't work. So for me, and this is, maybe I'm a student of this space. It means a lot to me. I love it. It's, well, this may sound strange, but capital markets and finance and economics is somewhat of a hobby for me, really because I like to understand why things are the way they are. And I bring that up because what I've spent a lot of time doing over the years is and maybe I'm a bit stubborn or something, but I don't like to really just go off of someone's advice, right? So we live in a world where we all tend to look to experts, whether it's legal, regulatory, marketing, whatever it may be. And I think that's okay for certain things, but for me, I didn't like to do that. I didn't feel comfortable not knowing the answers myself. So what I've done over the last 30 years is really kind of spend a lot of time understanding rule of law, understanding regulations, understanding why lawmakers decided to craft certain rules, and really what I found after all this is a lot of the rules that we have in front of us today are really there because someone did something bad at some point, right? So what do lawmakers do when something bad happens? They rush to judgment, and they rush to really, solve that problem. And although they often have very good intentions, what happens is a lot of those rules that people rush to get into place are often, not ideal. So I guess, from my standpoint, what kind of my approach to this has led me to is it's allowed me to as we've kind of gone through this innovative process, is to also be very innovative in the model and design in itself, right? From a legal and regulatory perspective, because I have done, I guess, my homework over the years. So it's kind of afforded us the opportunity to really look at what we want to do, and rather than kind of use the existing structure as a template, it was more about understanding why the template today is wrong. Why it's less than advantageous to a consumer, and then taking kind of the current rule set and reapplying it to a very innovative model, but doing it in a way where, like I said, rather than just using it as a template, but really messing up that template, rethinking that template, and then applying innovation on top of it, which at the end of the day, I believe, gives us a model for a platform that can really, really change
the consumer experience when it comes to investing.
Awesome, Stephen. So, can you tell us a little bit about Ethos and how Ethos fits in this story of yours? So how is this going to solve, and how does it fit in this current model? What's it going to change?
Sure, absolutely. Came about from a couple of different perspectives, right? So clearly, from my standpoint, early on, when I saw the way that Shingo thought of the world, and the way that he wanted to solve the problems that he saw purely in crypto. And what I was kind of doing in parallel to that was looking at traditional and saying, well, you know, what are the problems in the traditional investment space, and how can you rethink and redesign that? So when Shingo and I were introduced and we met each other, what I think we both figured out really quickly is that although we were looking at two very different spaces, ultimately our visions were aligned. And what that means is that you know, Shingo was thinking about how do I rethink crypto, which is very early, but I think he recognized that the current state of crypto could never lead to mass adoption, right? Because it is so complicated, because you know, it is very much a technical business, right? So in order to solve that problem, to remove that as much of that complexity as possible, I think Shingo, you know, came up with a very forward-thinking, very easy but complex solution about how to go about doing that. And as I said, you know, because we were really looking at these two things in parallel, what we did do is sit back and look at, well, can we blend these two things together? And can we, for a consumer anywhere in the world, you know, truly rethink how, you know, how assets are, you know, first acquired, but then how assets are held and kept, and then how assets can be redeployed in a sense where, you know, those same assets that you acquire for purely, you know, investment reasons or speculative reasons, that you could reuse or redeploy those assets to continue to generate additional income and yield for yourself. And again, whether that's for immediate needs or whether that's long-term for retirement. So really what Ethos is about is it's about, you know, really taking that community approach to, you know, to how we actually will help one another really advance ourselves economically, but also in a safe way. So what we attempt to do here is, and I use this term quite a bit, right? So when I think about Ethos itself, I'll use a more traditional kind of explanation of what it is, right? But I've said this a lot. It's a hybrid, you know, multi-sided investment platform. So that's a mouthful, I know. But what does that mean, right? So hybrid is, you know, is meant to mean both crypto assets and your standard investment assets. And then multi-sided means a place or an ecosystem where consumers and developers and businesses can meet, and then, you know, to discover one another, to find the best opportunities to really, you know, to progress a consumer forward in its investment approach and its investment portfolio. But on the other side as well, it's to help, you know, industries, and specifically at the start, the financial industry, really solve some of its problems with, you know, with why it can't service really a large percentage of the population. So, and again, I know that's a lot of information here, but that the multi-sided part of this ecosystem is motivated by the fact that we want to
you know, remove a lot of the layers that exist. We all know that the current model is over intermediated. But our intent is not necessarily to, you know, take 2 or 3 layers of intermediaries that exist in the process and remove them completely. Really, what we want to do is we want to allow the financial industry to do what they should do and do what they should do best, which is, you know, from an investment standpoint, help you manage your money. I think we may have frozen, and I apologize. I'm not sure why that is. But, you know, so I think that's a very important thing that, you know, where we started out saying, you know, clearly that we wanted to solve the problems from a consumer investment standpoint. But at the same time, what we realized is that, you know, you can both solve the consumer experience along with remove a lot of historical obstacles that existed for the industry itself. And then by virtue of that, open up access and make what we see as the new kind of Finance 2.0 much more inclusive than it has been ever. And that's very important to us here.
Sounds awesome, Stephen. Sounds awesome, Stephen. Can you see if you can fix the screen?
Yep.
Okay, so to summarize, it's Ethos is rethinking the way finance is done, and is building a hybrid platform. Easily said, it's actually the only thing you will need in the crypto space. To invest in, to manage your money, to manage your funds, and not only the cryptocurrency, but also the traditional stocks. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Sounds awesome. Okay, I'm going to ask the audience if they have anything to follow up on this, to what you just said, and, or else we will just continue. Ja, one moment. Dus even een korte samenvatting inderdaad. Ik hoop dat iedereen een beetje meekrijgt. Hij heeft zoveel informatie wat hij moet delen. Is er iemand die een vraag heeft over wat hij net verteld heeft? Dus iets wat niet duidelijk is of iets dergelijks? Nee? Zullen we gewoon verder gaan? Nee, top. Okay, awesome, Stephen. You're speaking very clearly because nobody had any questions. So it's awesome. Okay, so for the platform, you will use the Ethos token. Can you tell us what the Ethos token is used for on the platform?
Absolutely. And I can't answer that question, of course, without starting off with, you know, looking at our peers in the industry as a whole, and where we kind of fit in this equation. I will tell you that, you know, iteration 1 of our industry from a token perspective. What exists today, you know, to be honest, if I'm going to look at it from a regulated standpoint, a lot of the tokens that existed in this first phase are really, you know, securitized tokens. Now that's a problem for consumers, I think, but I think it's clearly a problem for those businesses that are part of kind of this phase 1. But I think what you're seeing now, kind of along the same time as our token sale back in the summer, is, you know, this next generation of tokens are much more driven by, you know, a token is a utility or a token is a functional token, right? And so what does that really mean, right? It's really just, I guess, simply put, is Ethos and other functional or pure utility tokens are those things that enable one to access a service, right? Or access technology, or access a product. So I mean, the Ethos token will be used, using kind of the industry term S-gas, to access these products or services. From our standpoint, we felt it was critically important to make sure that, you know, if there's an opportunity to provide a product or service to a consumer free, that should be our motivation. If we have to provide a product or service to a consumer at a cost, we want to make sure that
that fee is as close to cost as possible. Now that may sound like a bad economic model, right? But here's why it's not. Because what we're doing from a consumer standpoint is we'll have layers. So there's your basic services, and then you'll have premium services. So from a transactional standpoint, we will, Ethos will be used to power transactions as gas. But then from a premium standpoint, there will be, more complex things or products and services that will be available that, one could, one will need Ethos to buy into that premium service. But I think the most important thing is what's going to be happening on the other side of this multi-sided platform. So as I mentioned, because we're a multi-sided platform, on the other side we have two main constituents. Businesses kind of broadly, and then developers. And what will happen from that standpoint is that, we via Bedrock, we will open up kind of this ecosystem to give businesses and developers access to APIs and other products and services. And by virtue of opening up that access, businesses and developers will be required to purchase or have Ethos on hand to pay for that access, to pay for certain functionality, which I believe is going to allow us to be very fee-friendly on the consumer side, because we should be, we will be able to, have a very strong fee structure on the business side of this, as well as the developer side of this. Now, a lot of that pricing structure is related to, going back to our vision here of really redesigning or rethinking how, what that C2B kind of consumer experience is in investing. So that's a long answer to your question. It should have been a simple answer, which was it's gas, right? So you'll need Ethos to pay for certain transactional-based services, but there'll be a lot of things that are free, like the universal wallet itself, at least from a basic standpoint. The more complicated a coin is, like a proof of stake coin, for instance, that would most likely fall more into a premium type wallet service that will be made available at a later stage. But the Ethos token is needed by all constituents in the ecosystem to really access a lot of this functionality and then engage what I call our intelligence hub. And part of this intelligence hub is our prediction service, right? So there'll be a lot of things like that, whether it's social or predictions, or the universal wallet itself, that you can access, participate in, really at no cost. So really, from a consumer standpoint, where cost tends to enter into the equation is really anything that involves a transaction, which is quite obvious as to why you would need to charge for that. But anything else that is really not non-transactional, for all intents and purposes, is somewhat of a free service, unless it kind of falls into a more premium type offering. Where, let's just give you an example. If I am a user on the platform and I'm involved in the, sorry about that, and I'm involved in predictions, for instance. What that allows me to do is to engage with other users from a social standpoint, but also be involved in predictions and really the generation of intelligence. And then as I'm doing this, what it's also allowing me to do is to build up my digital reputation. And another part of where we see this going, and I'll use a correlation, but don't take me necessarily literally, but there's a lot of things that you can. But if you think of Uber, right? So Uber has really kind of changed an industry that's existed for hundreds of years, I guess. And they did that through a very simple model. So in the way that we think about the reputation in the digital space, the the way we see that working within our ecosystem is that, you know, there are the various stages of, you know, of reputation. And at the end of this, you have really someone that can, you know, a reputation can be someone of an expert level, but if we use it in the investment space, it could be someone who really is at that investment professional level. So one aspect of this platform that we foresee is really providing users the ability to kind of, you know, transition from this, you know, really self-driven investment process to one where, you know, as they build up reputation, moving to a point where they actually become, you know, quote unquote, an investment professional. And we see as part of this structure the potential to provide an opportunity to those folks who are, you know, who kind of fall into this investment professional category, having the opportunity to really put their skills to work more directly and you know, from a more full-time perspective, I guess is a good way to put it, where we can incentivize users to actually, you know, rather than focus purely on their own investment portfolio, but mature into a position where they can directly help manage other consumers' portfolios, and really, you know, then once we start to do that, we can take that and really mature it kind of along the investment cycle and model, where we can do some really creative and dynamic things that we think consumers will really enjoy and benefit from. But I think this whole idea of reputation and social, and where we can kind of apply it to the financial industry, and where we can take that becomes very interesting, because, you know, we all do live in this digital space, and I think you know, having access to very diverse talent is critical. So we think that could be a very, very, very powerful aspect of the platform that incentivizes engagement by, you know, really a very diverse group of people, but also a group that will have, you know, superior talent at the end of the day as well, but also one where we can trust, because we have, you know, we've really built this reputation up in a public forum. So therefore, we should be able to trust that information. We should be able to trust, using in industry's term, that track record of a person. So I think that in the financial space, that's very different, right? So all we have in the financial space today is, you know, maybe a public profile for a company, and some track record for a company. But there's a lot. What's kind of missing in that is a lot of open and transparent history around, you know, the background of a firm, a background of individuals within that firm. So, you know, bringing that element to this space, I think, will be powerful at the end of the day. It's just a matter of, you know, making sure that as you build out that model, that you do it very, very carefully. Because at the end of the day, what we don't want to do, because there's enough risk already today when it comes to investing, we don't want to add in or redesign the process to where it creates more risk for an individual, but rather de-risks the environment for an individual.
Okay, awesome information. Can you see if you can fix the video feed, because we're just looking at a picture of you? Yeah, that's better. Okay.
All right.
So got a little bit sidetracked there. Back to the token. Is there any benefit of holding the token? Because everybody's a crypto trader at this moment, but what would be the benefits of just holding the token?
Well, you know, we deal with this question quite a bit in a lot of our open communities. You know, I think the value in a functional token carries with it really a lot of the same traits as a, you know, whether you want to call it a tokenized security or whether you want to call it a security in kind of a traditional space today. The only thing that's really absent there is the ability to, you know, vote as a shareholder or receive dividends directly back from a company. So I understand that those two things are important pieces of kind of the investment structure. But if you really think about the voting side of that, from an individual standpoint, our impact or potential impact on a business is diluted, and that's true today both in the traditional and crypto space. Because as you add in, you know, more shareholders into the process, you know, dilution is a natural result, right? So from the perspective of a functional token, in Ethos specifically, you know, I think the value in holding the token, first and foremost, is that, you know, because of, you know, really the tremendous benefits one gets from having that token and being able to access these very dynamic products and services. Now, the way a functional token works is that it's, you know, where we started out, and a lot of people kind of think about this very differently than I think we do. You know, with a functional token or a utility token goes through its token sale. Really what we're doing there is that the consumers or investors that participate in that token sale, you know, are really buying into this vision. And really what they're saying is that we believe in this vision, and therefore we will participate in this token sale and help fund the creation of this model or this platform in our example. And by virtue of that, I mean, I see that as, you know, because you as an investor or consumer have participated in this token sale, you now have, you know, you have access to a token that, you know, at that point has a certain value to it, right? But going forward, what I think the opportunity is that, you know, you bought in by virtue of supporting a vision. You bought into something very early on, and you now have X tokens, right? Whatever that number of tokens that you have, that will equate to a very different amount of tokens that you will need to access a particular product or service. So let's just kind of use a very basic example. So if I bought into a token sale and it cost me 5 cents per token to get in, then, you know, at that early stage, the assumption is that the product or service that will be developed will be 5 cents, you know, will cost 5 cents a token. As you all know, that's not reality, right? So as we move through the process and develop the process, then, you know, the potential value of that token is thought of very differently. Which then, and again, I don't want to pretend like speculation doesn't exist here, because it does. But, you know, the perceived public price of that token is going to change, right? It's going to go up, it's going to go down, it's going to go sideways. But I guess my point is this: if I bought in and it cost me 5 cents, and we develop a product, and certain fees, so, you know, certain fees are set at levels that are, you know, 50 cents, whatever the number is, 25 cents, 10 cents, whatever that number is. You as a token holder have a cost base that is very different than the cost to the products and services that become available. So what that means to you is that if I bought 10,000 tokens as part of the token sale, and the product is launched, and that product now only requires, you know, is going to cost a fraction of what was originally perceived, then for you as a holder, you could potentially have, you know, twice as many tokens that you'll actually need to participate in the platform itself. So by virtue of that, you now have the power an opportunity to resell that token directly to another consumer. And later consumers, as they come into this process, will have a different price target for them that they believe, the products and services are worth, right? So I think there's a natural upside in that dynamic, right? Where not only do you get the benefits of the products and services by holding the token, but because you saw the vision and bought into that vision early on, you have the ability later on down the road to resell that to a consumer at a different price point because of supply and demand. I think that's a good outcome for an early token holder who was interested in the project and supported the project. It's a natural potential outcome for someone in that position. So I don't want to be naive and say that the benefit of the product and service itself is enough to be kind of the sole motivator. I completely understand that it's not. But I think as I think about the ecosystem itself, or the industry itself, if you are a pure token, really what happens from a secondary market standpoint is that the supply and demand changes a token's value, and you as an early holder have the opportunity to reassess how many tokens that you have, how many tokens that you believe you need to gain access to that product and service, and you, by virtue of being a early holder, have the opportunity or power to resell that directly to another potential user of the platform, based off of that new price target based on supply and demand.
Okay, well, one could say that everybody who's here today is an early investor. So, because even if you got in just today, my brother-in-law just bought his first 60 Ethos tokens. So, but he's still early in the game. Is there any because if you look up on the white paper, you're talking about one-click diversification and baskets, and would that also be a benefit for holding the token? Is that just directly possible with the Ethos token? Would it be a benefit to hold it?
Well, I purely from the transactional standpoint, right? So, our early thoughts here are this: is that, as I think a lot of you probably know, the most important thing we're trying to solve for is the fiat entry point. And we'll kind of come back and talk about that a little bit more. But to answer your question specifically, Michael, right? The way we see this from a user option standpoint is that we want to give you the easiest entry point to purchase into a basket. So you'll be able to do that with Bitcoin, Ether, Ethos, or fiat. Okay. And so any one of those four options at the start to buy into a basket can gain you access. Now, from the perspective of the basket itself, clearly Ethos is gas, right? So as you create the basket, there are, Ethos will be used as part of generating that transaction. Now, Ethos can also be a basket constituent, right? So it's an asset like any other coin. So there's a lot of direct from a gas standpoint, but indirect from the perspective of how do I, seed a portfolio itself, and then therefore, and also, do I want to have Ethos as part of an investment basket itself? So, as we think about a lot of the things that go around basket creation, there's a lot of ample, there's ample opportunity for Ethos to be used in very different ways.
Okay. Next to the universal wallet, you just mentioned it, is the fiat gateway. And I think that's one of the biggest plus sides of Ethos. You mentioned to me a few weeks ago that zero fee or as close to zero as possible. Well, that would be absolutely awesome. But how's that going?
Let's see how we can cover this. So I'm not sure who here who saw the Crypto Lark interview, but I think we talked about some interesting things there. And I guess I'll use this kind of same correlation today. So again, I'm not picking on Coinbase, but they're just always front of mind. So when I think about the user experience from Coinbase and a lot of other folks in the space, what often happens is that the onboarding process from our perspective as a consumer is a bit laborious, right? I mean, I think we're accepting of it in this industry because we've been involved with it for a while. It was very painful, 3-5 years ago, and it's gotten a little better, but it's less than ideal. And as I mentioned in that interview, and I'll mention it here, is that Coinbase's model and a lot of the other early entrants into the space, their models are driven by something I referred to earlier, right? So their models are driven by the legal structure that they kind of built or designed their business on. So when I look at Coinbase, to me, I know exactly why their process is the way it is, and it is very much because of how they structured themselves. So to be more specific than I was even in the interview is that when you look at Coinbase, Coinbase is what? Coinbase is a money transmitter. So when you think about regulatory approvals, right? There's various degrees of regulatory authorizations that you can have, whether it's here in the U.S., whether it's in Europe, whether it's in Asia, and where MSB sits in that stack is really at the bottom, right? So the MSB in the U.S., let me just talk about the U.S. specifically, right? So in the U.S., MSB was meant to be a catch-all for all potential businesses that are involved in the movement of money, right? And so what that means, though, is that from a business standpoint, the flexibilities I get to enjoy are limited significantly than those one layer or several layers above me from a regulatory authorization standpoint, right? So I guess to be direct, when I look at Coinbase's model, I see an MSB-based business, money transmitter-based business, which I know results in a very restrictive a very restrictive finance model around it because of how the financial industry tends to manage MSB-related businesses. I know that there's a lot of information there, right? So for me and for us here at Ethos, what we want to be able to do is to understand the drivers for the existing models that exist today, understand all the various options that we can have in this kind of financial authorization stack, and choose that entry point for a particular layer that would provide us with a very robust consumer experience when it came to how one enters into the crypto space, and specifically fiat. So the way we've designed this from a legal standpoint, I won't tell you exactly which layer we're going to be in, but we're in a higher layer in the stack, which by virtue of that higher layer gives us much more flexibility in how fiat, crypto, and traditional assets all interact. And that is hugely important because it removes a lot of the pain that exists for all of us. And again, a lot of us who have been in the space for a long time have kind of somewhat come to accept the existing model, but it really, there are better ways to do it. So for us, it was about finding that better way, and then optimizing the heck out of it. And that's exactly what we're doing today. And so how do you make that free? And I guess it comes down to, think about the ecosystem that we're building. Think about what multi-sided means. Think about what our revenue profile or fee profile will look like in that space. And I will tell you this: Shingo is very, very much of the mindset that if we don't need the charge, the consumer don't, right? So if the fiat experience today is a bad one, let's fix it. And if we can, from a business standpoint, responsibly provide a service without charging, then we're going to do it. But I think that the diverse nature of our ecosystem and our fee models will allow us to do that. So will we exactly land on free? Jury's still out, but I think the most important thing to remember is that that's our motivation, because we want to make it as simplistic as possible. We want to ramp up and get to mass adoption as quickly as possible. So how do you do that, right? I mean, I think whether it's a freemium type model or however we look at it, there are smart ways to do that, but also smart ways to do that from a business standpoint, right? To make sure that the value of the business is represented in the token in a very responsible way.
Okay, well, you had the chance as Ethos to completely rebuild this financial model. And I saw a little smirk there, so we're hoping for a zero fee, because if you deposit $1,000 into a Coinbase, I think everybody here uses Coinbase or a lot, and then once you have it in Bitcoin and transfer it back, it's like a lot of money gone. So I hope you can fix it. There's a lot of information coming, so I'm going to quickly recap with the group, see if they're up to par, and we'll come right back. Yeah? Heel veel informatie natuurlijk. Echt, als je een simpele vraag stelt, dan staat er voor hem heel veel achter. Dus dat is voor iedereen een beetje te volgen. Of moet ik vragen of hij iets korter is in zijn antwoorden? Directer? Zo is het goed voor iedereen? Ja? Oké.
Ik heb nog wel een vraag. Hij zegt dus dat je met Bitcoin en met Ethereum, maar ook met Ethos kan investeren op een platform, zeg maar, dus je baskets kan kopen. Gaan ze dan ook aanmoedigen om juist de Ethos token bijvoorbeeld te gebruiken? Dus dat ze dat meer in preference stellen in plaats van Bitcoin of Ethereum?
Ja, oké. Yeah, we're back.
All right.
It's clear to the group, so no questions. I think it's pretty clear what you're trying to do. Rebuild the model completely and try to get it to zero fee as possible. I got another question out of the group. Like you can invest on a platform with Ethereum, Bitcoin, and all other stuff, perhaps. But is it incentivized to use the Ethos token, or is it just for some features you need the Ethos, or how does it work?
Always, yeah. So you will always be incentivized to use the Ethos token. So clearly that would be optimal for many different reasons. So I want to make sure that this point is clear, right? So as we are working through the design of the model and then dev, what we are also doing is, in parallel, is designing kind of that fee model. And I'm saying that because I'm gonna answer the question, but understanding that we're still kind of moving through this process, right? But we absolutely see the opportunity for users to be incentivized to have Ethos to access certain products and services, And by virtue of having Ethos over something else, there's a benefit to using Ethos, if that makes sense. So, and let me just give you an example, right? So if I can enter into a basket and seed a basket, you know, maybe the possible outcomes are, you know, if let's just say, I want to seed a basket with Ether, and so there is absolutely an opportunity here in our fee structure model to say that, well, if you want to seed your basket with Ether, fees may cost you X, right? But if you choose to use Ethos to seed your basket, your fee will be Y, which will be lower, a lower cost point than if you were to use Ether. So, you know, those dynamics options will be part of the fee model itself. But again, I just kind of emphasize this with a lot of this is still a moving target. It's not a moving target because we're not thinking about it, but it's more about, you know, really understanding what the economics look like for us as a business, right? Before you kind of solidify all of these things. But again, I'll always kind of come back and re-emphasize the fact that Shingo has made it very, very clear that wherever we can, you know, keep that consumer cost down is really our goal. Whether it's zero or you know, some friendly for consumers. Now, and actually, let me kind of go back to something that I think the comment you made, Mike, right before you stepped out for a sec. So what I think is terribly important here for everyone to understand, right, is that at least in the early days, what we're talking about here is an investment platform, an investment ecosystem. So as someone who's been in that space for a long time, what is often overlooked by most consumers and often not spoken about by financial firms are the costs that are involved in an investment process. So why is it important that, why am I emphasizing that we're building an investment platform? Because, you know, if we come into this understanding that this is an investment platform, then we, as, you know, really servicing consumers, have to understand that costs and fees are corrosive, right, to investment capital. So our intention here is to be very mindful of the cost component in the investment process, rather than the existing model that exists even in our industry, but especially in the traditional side, where it's very much driven by, you know, both explicit fees and implicit fees. And the implicit ones are very, very dangerous, right? So, so I guess, let me say this a little differently. Because we're thinking about this as an investment platform, it's terribly important that we, wherever we can, keep the corrosive nature of fees on a consumer's investment portfolio as little as possible, as small as possible. Because I've seen the outcome and how it can eat away at a portfolio. So if you're going to do this and do it well and do it smart, then you have to at the start understand and have full transparency around costs and fees, and make sure that you're building something that is very efficient to keep the corrosive nature of fees down.
Yeah, that's your screen froze again.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's. I'm so glad we have you at the wheel of this financial change, because you speak so enthusiastically about this, and you really want to change this, and not from a business perspective from your side, but more for the consumers. And I hope everybody takes notice, because this will really change the game, because everywhere you go, there are fees, fees, fees. Like every single transaction, every click, every thing you do is fees, and we don't calculate them in, but if you add them up, it's so much. And if I come back to the question from the audience, I think for an investment perspective, it's good to use the Ethos tokens and give extra discounts for that, compared to Ethereum and Bitcoin, because it would also give another reason for us to hodl, let's say, and keep our coins. So it's really awesome. So the fiat gateway, if you do it like this, if you build this like how you say it's going to be built, and because of the legal structure of, let's say, Coinbase, it would be almost impossible for them to adapt, right? And I think you said it like in 2 years we'll beat Coinbase, 7 years Fidelity. So are those, I got this question from the group, is it possible for them to adapt and overrun you? Or are they too big, too slow, can't move fast enough? Or is their legal structure built in a way that they can't even change? So will you just run them by? Or is there anything they can do to stop us?
I mean, I'd be negligent to say, no, right? So yes, of course, right? I mean, every business, especially an established one, has an advantage, right? Let's be honest, over younger firms like ourselves. But so for me and in Shingo and the team, it's very much about thinking about, well, how do you, as a business, mitigate those risks, right? So how do you lessen someone's competitive strength over a newbie like ourselves? So I will tell you this, is that we've spent a lot of time really kind of looking at this. So let me answer your question specifically. Can they change or can they react from a legal standpoint? Absolutely. Yep. So let's be honest. You can move up and down this layer or this stack. Not necessarily at will, meaning on a dime, but there are things that you can do to kind of move yourself up and down the stack. So Coinbase absolutely has. Oops. Let me see if I can fix this. So Coinbase has that option. However, I don't, because of where we chose to fit in this stack, I don't think Coinbase can or would want to really shift in a way where they're sitting in the same position in this stack. I just don't think it's feasible. I think again they could do it, but to be honest, it'll make their model look really weird. It's the only way to say it without really telling you exactly what we're doing, right? But for them to shift, at least from my vantage point, it would be a massive conflict of interest for them to shift, because really they would be consuming a lot of different things and doing a lot of and having a lot of positions in kind of the life cycle of an event that would provide that would enter a lot of conflict of interest, I think, and that would ultimately have a negative impact on the consumer. So I think for them, they'll stay in the space that they're in. I see them long term as potentially being maybe a NASDAQ down the road or something like that. And we should talk about regulation at some point. But so from a competitive standpoint, I believe where we fall in the stack is going to make it very, very challenging for existing firms to make a shift over to where we are. So that's good. Now clearly that doesn't solve newbies, right? Because what's going to happen, and it's interesting, we've actually already seen this, right? And I think you know this, Michael, and a lot of you as well, is that we're very transparent about a lot of different things, very, very open, very, very willing to answer questions. What we've seen over the last couple months is as we've answered questions, you know, as soon as 2 weeks later, we've seen white papers that basically are using our words, our ideas word for word. So we're being we kind of shifted there a little bit and said, all right, well, we want to be open and transparent, but we need to be very, very careful about, you know, the indicators that we're putting out there, because there's a lot of folks who are trying to mimic some of the things that we're doing, right? So, but from a competition standpoint, it's easier for a newbie or a new firm to enter into the space in the same place in the stack as we are, which is why we're being very, very careful about the timing of that, because we believe once we're you know, in market, ramp up's gonna occur most likely very, very quickly. So I think that's going to put us in a position where it's going to be hard for even a newbie to catch up. So yeah, there's a lot of information I just threw at you there, Michael. So I think I answered your question. If I didn't, we can come back and I'll answer it again.
This was actually one of the clearest answers you gave us. One moment, Stephen.
Hoe kan de fee 0 zijn? Hoe regelen we dat?
Yeah, okay. Gewoon zo. What I want to say is awesome, because either you manage to let all the other financial firms change their game to be compared to you, or either you will run them by, because nobody here will use Coinbase if your fees are 0 or close to 0. Yeah? Because everybody just knows that if I want to cash out $10,000, I have to pay a lot of premium. And if I can do it with like 0 fee or almost no fee, then we all use Ethos. So that's really cool. And I got a question from the audience. How will you do it? Or did you already answer that? Get the fees to 0. Is it even possible in financial ways? Because I deposit money, you have to pay me in euro. How is it possible for you to get this to 0? Is this possible in the current model? Do you have to? Can you say what you're going to do, or are you going to tell the competition and they'll have it in a white paper next week?
Well, I can guarantee you, if I say it, even someone's white paper next week, so I can't say it. But I mean, think about it this way. There's a couple different ways to answer this. Now, clearly, I've been in this space a long time. So, I guess there's a lot of things about the space that I understand that I think some others may not. But I also have a kind of deep network as well that we're leveraging the heck out of. So my answer is this, is that the model itself exploits a lot of opportunities for us as a business, but more importantly for the end consumer and for existing financial firms as well. But what it also does is allow us to talk to partners that will be involved in this process, and really, I'll be frank, quite simply show them why it would be advantageous, A, to be a partner, B, and more importantly, to not kill us with the normal crypto fees, right? Because what happens is, and again, what the heck, we're talking about Coinbase, we'll just keep using Coinbase, right? But if you're Coinbase, and you have to seek a partner that helps you in your process, right? And that's just whether it's fiat or something else. What tends to be the industry response today is, most times, if you ask 10 different firms, 9 of them are going to say no, and 1 of them will say sure, but I'm going to, it's going to cost you 3 times more than it would cost another firm, right? And that's because of the perceived risk in crypto and servicing a crypto firm as a customer, right? I think we solve for that issue that the industry faces by virtue of our model. and also because of I guess my relationships with the industry, right? So I can I have sat across the table, and I will continue to do it, from big firms in the space, and really walk them through what we intend to do, and remove the risk that they perceive to be in the crypto space, but also lessen the risk that even exists within our own model. Because I mean, what a lot of people, I think, get wrong is that the financial industry, can be defensive, right, about its own competitive position. But if there's an opportunity for the financial industry to make money, they're not going to turn that away, right? But one of the things that they have to do is they have to look at a relationship and really assess all of the risks that come with that business. So, what we felt very early on is if you have the right model, it lessens the risk for any potential business partner or strategic partner, which is highly important, right? Because what that does is that now creates a much more fluid relationship between us and any partner, because it's now it's been significantly de-risked. It removes a lot of the issues that, at least in iteration one of our industry, exist today that that are deemed high risk. So we remove a lot of those things, which allows us to have a different risk profile than many other crypto firms. And then because of the power of our model and the fact that we solve problems for both consumers and businesses, right? What that allows us to do is to say, all right, first of all, we've significantly de-risked our business. Here's how we did that. Do you agree? And most say, yeah, okay, yes, we agree, so we feel better about these things. And then what we can do really quickly is get people to understand how they could benefit immediately, right? And benefit meaning revenue for themselves. And if they are cost-friendly to us, then that will help our growth while also helping theirs, right? So it's a dynamic, kind of multifaceted conversation and process, but we're very mindful of all of these different things that exist for our industry when it's engaging potential partners, and we believe the model solves for a lot of those things. But at the same time, I understand very, very well, what their onboarding process is for any partner. Again, that could be a consumer customer or a business partner like ourselves. And we de-risk that quite a bit, and so we can spend much less time on talking about the risk side of the business, more about the opportunity side of the business. So therefore, that should allow us to have a much more friendly cost structure with our partners, which means that we have much more flexibility in how we price services to consumers.
Sounds great. I'm going to recap real quick. I see that even if you tell people your plan, you still need a lot of knowledge to just, you can say like, we're going to do this at 0 fee or close to 0 fee, but then you have to build it up from the ground up for it being to actually work. Yeah, so
yes.
I'm going to recap real quick with the group and then I'll come back to you, yeah? Wat je nu opvalt in zijn gesprekken, heel veel mensen die investeren in een munt en je ziet iets voorbij komen, ja maar zij hebben dat ook. En ja maar zij hebben ook een mobile platform of hun hebben ook een wallet. Wat je hierin ziet is dat het team wat hierachter zit, het vanaf de grond af gestructureerd heeft om in de toekomst al die problemen uit de weg te gaan. Dus je kunt wel zeggen wij maken ook een universal wallet of wij maken ook een fiat gateway, maar dan vervolgens dan missen ze de complete structuur. Ze missen de connecties, ze missen eigenlijk alles. Dus ik hoop dat jullie naar zijn antwoorden luisteren en ook echt onthouden van wat voor implicatie heeft dat nou op waar we in geïnvesteerd zijn en hoe groot gaat dit worden. Dus dit is niet zomaar een fiat gateway. Hey, dit is een fiat gateway die zo gestructureerd is dat geen enkele andere munt dit kan nadoen. Ja, dus dit is echt geweldig. En ik hoop dat het voor jullie ook informatie geeft. Dat je denkt van ja, waar ik in geïnvesteerd heb, gaat echt gewoon groot worden. Dit is echt super.
Ik heb wel een vraag.
Ja.
Als het zo groot gaat worden en het wordt populair en sneller geadopteerd door iedereen, hoe scalable is
Ja. Hey Stephen, I just recapped it. We also saw that you're holding that Bitcoin token right there. you're a hodler, man. You even hold it when you're not online.
It's funny. When I got it, wrote down my back, has left my pocket since. So I think of it as my lucky charm.
Yeah, you gotta print some Ethos ones, and we're gonna need about 50 of them. I got a great question out of the group because yeah, we all know Ethos is going to be big, but I myself also follow 10x, and they had like a vision of how big they will be, but they grew so fast that they actually had to stop the orders because they couldn't scale fast enough.
Right.
So let's say you have a fiat gateway, and I tell my friend, and he tells a friend, and everybody's like, oh my god, 0 fee. And you get like 20, 30, 40, 50, 60,000 new users a day, just like Coinbase. Yeah? How fast can you scale? Is it even scalable now?
So there's two answers to this. Yes, I will tell you that the dev team, led by, and really with a lot of guidance from Shingo, the way we're building this from the start is to make sure that it is very dynamic and very flexible, which will also be very scalable. Mike, you know this. If there's one thing I'm not, is a technician or an engineer. But what I can tell you is that we had a lot of intent before we even started any development work to make sure that the infrastructure that we were going to build everything on was going to be dynamic enough and flexible enough to make sure that we could scale and scale relatively at ease. So I'm confident about that aspect of it. Now, you can never, as you know, you can never anticipate 60,000 users coming in a day, right? I think Shingo, for the first time, alluded to something last night in one of our communities. So what he said is that we're going to be very, very careful and with a lot of intent start to introduce and roll out these services when they're ready, right? So in Telegram, I think he had mentioned that I wouldn't take it literally on the number, but with fiat, we're thinking that there will be a cap number initially where we will open up access and then kind of slow it down or throttle it back because we don't want to be overwhelmed from that standpoint, right? So I guess as part of kind of this rollout structure, it'll be very controlled in a way where instead of just saying, all right, we're live today and everyone can come in, we're going to do it very, very carefully with a lot of intent, where we kind of open it up, but cap it, then really make sure that everything is working as we see fit. If we need to further optimize something, it'll give us the opportunity to do it, and then we can throttle back up again to make sure that we're dealing with all of these things appropriately. But I do believe, though, that the infrastructure that we really set out, the core infrastructure, was designed in a way that's going to allow us to be to scale quickly.
That's all we needed to hear. It's logical that you throttle it down a bit so we can start testing. So the universal wallet is already awesome. That made me personally invest before I knew anything else. Then you have the social platform, which is great. We already talked about that. Then you have the fiat gateway. Now we're already far above level awesome. And then with the new rebrand, Shingo wrote a masterpiece called Bedrock. And if I read it correctly, Bedrock is something that other companies can build on.
That's right.
Can you explain a little bit about Bedrock and why is it so awesome? And what other put a feather in Shingo's cap. No, but just explain why will it add value to Ethos and what can other companies do with Bedrock?
Yeah. So first we'll start with, again, kind of this multi-sided aspect of the platform, right? So because of that structure, there will be businesses that will be coming to the platform either because they want to provide product or services, but probably more importantly because we will have unique information and capabilities that they desire, right? But also from the developer standpoint, right, there will be APIs that we are building that will be very specific to our ecosystem that a developer can come in, leverage those APIs, and then build, their own app or another product or service that will enrich the user experience. So we believe kind of this Bedrock is kind of the foundation for how developers can come in and then build off of these unique APIs that we'll have, but also businesses who want to connect into our platform by virtue of these APIs, as well as being, a participant on a multi-sided platform. So by virtue of, coming through it, Bedrock and using API services or offering other products and services on the platform, businesses and developers will be required to have Ethos to pay for that access. And I think that's a very critical point to understand, right? When you think about the economics of what we're trying to build here, we believe that, and actually Shingo mentioned this in an early interview as well, right? If you use Coinbase as an example in their custody wallet, right? They came out, they said, we have a custody wallet, which actually I think is a good idea, but they're charging $100,000. To me, that's an awfully expensive solution if you're a business looking for that type of an option. So our Bedrock structure will allow firms to, and let's just use this as a one-for-one correlation, firms who want to leverage our enterprise universal wallet option and really build on that for their own purposes. And by virtue of that, they have to have Ethos to pay for it, which again is part of our economic model here. That will greatly help our overall fee structure and how we price certain things for particular constituents. So.
I think it's an awesome addition to Ethos because it doesn't just make it a token, a utility token, but also a platform to build off. And you're kind of chasing like Ethereum in a way, but then with even more functionality. So it's really, really cool. I'm gonna ask the audience real quick if they have any questions about this. Iemand nog een vraag over iets wat hij nu heeft gezegd, of over Bedrock zelf, of in ieder geval niet van een developer standpoint, maar nee? Okay, all clear. Another question. It might be a little bit technical, but just answer it in a in a way we can understand. But Shingo talked about atomic swaps, and Ethos probably being the first to do so with ERC20 tokens. What value do atomic swaps bring, and is this even true?
So atomic swaps absolutely have a value, right? I think where the opportunity is how do you apply that, and in what business model do you apply that in, right? Now let's just use the example of some of our decentralized exchanges out there. You know, the concept is great, right? But in a decentralized kind of manner, what is the most challenging thing? It's about finding someone else who's looking to take another side of the trade. But then it's probably more importantly, it's about price discovery. Okay? So atomic swaps have they play a very critical role, especially as we think about risk, right? It's just a matter of how do you build a model around that resolves kind of the issues that, I'll speak for myself, that I see, right? So what I see with atomic swaps, or even kind of this peer-to-peer decentralized model, the issues I see as purely a consumer and an investor is that, well, you know, how do I find someone who's willing to take the other side of my trade at that exact moment in time? And then how do I and this other person come to terms on what the right price is? So you have to solve those problems. You can't just, you know, create atomic swaps, put it on a platform and say, all right, you know, we're a peer-to-peer platform, you guys go find each other, come to terms, and execute. I don't think that aligns well with mass adoption, right? If you want mass adoption, if you create a peer-to-peer opportunity via atomic swaps, that's fantastic. But you have to be make sure people can be found. You have to make sure they can be found in real time, or in that moment. And then you have to make sure that you overlay a transparent and accurate price discovery tool, right? So there's a lot of use there. There's a lot of potential there, but what I'm seeing early on and kind of the way folks are thinking about how that works, I don't necessarily think that's right? Because if you want mass adoption, you really, really have to, you have to protect people's best interest, right? So I don't think, and I'm sure there'll be people who disagree with me, right? But in a world where it's peer-to-peer, you run the risk of a less knowledgeable, less informed person to be really, taken advantage of. And for me, I don't want to build a business that really kind of leaves a consumer entirely to their own devices. I want to make sure that they're protected as best we can by making sure that there's full transparency, but also full capabilities with regards to how you find a counterparty, whether that counterparty is another peer, whether that counterparty is another business, right? You need to make sure that you can discover who that person is, but also you know what the price is, and then you have a mechanism that can settle. So there are a lot of use cases, but it's just you got to have that right model, and I think atomic swaps fit very well in our model. And atomic swaps in our model, and I think this is probably more important, right, is that atomic swaps allow for the opportunity to actually have P2B, or P2E, if you want to think of it that way, where we have, if you think about our ecosystem, if we have the ability to send orders out, or indications of interest, however you want to classify it, to exchanges, and we hit a particular bid or offer somewhere, if we have the ability to settle via a very unique structure between our platform and exchanges, that kind of leverages some of this the benefits of atomic swaps in that model, I think there's a fantastic opportunity for to apply it in that way. So I don't want to say too much about that, but I guess my point is this: it needs a lot of careful thought, because I don't think the early thoughts are really protective of a consumer. I think it's more, hands off. I'm gonna leave you to your own devices and good luck, and that worries me.
Yeah, okay. I understand you can't talk too much about it, giving away your competitive advantage. And I think it would be a great addition to, again, an already awesome platform. So it's really cool. I'm as good as through the questions we have had. Is there anything we missed? Anything you said, well, like, okay, I said a lot of things, a lot of information, but I want to tell a little bit about this.
Specifically, but let's see where we go with this. What I'd like to do is, I think I mentioned this on a Reddit post at one point, but I want to kind of talk about at least what it means to us when we say this multi-sided platform, this multi-sided ecosystem. Now, I think I mentioned this earlier, so my background is very much on this institutional side. And I don't know how many folks know much about the institutional side of the financial industry. But the institutional side of the financial industry enjoys a ton of benefit. And let me kind of give you some specifics, right? So if I am a large capital owner, i.e. I'm the actual investor, and I'm an institutional investor, typically that involves either, some large pension plan or something along those lines, right? So if I'm the overseer of this large pension plan, what it allows me to do is engage the financial industry in a very different way, right? Where so let's say my pension plan has 100 billion in assets. So by virtue of that sheer size, right? When I'm engaging any financial partner, and it doesn't matter whether it's Goldman Sachs, BlackRock, or anybody in between, what that gives me as an institutional asset owner of that size is it gives me leverage, and that leverage to me is critically important, right? So let me kind of give you some details as to what I think that means. So if I'm a large asset owner, I go to BlackRock, for instance. And because I know I have size in assets, I know I have a little bit of leverage over my potential service provider. So what happens in this relationship is that we sit down at a table and I say, okay, I want you to build me, a dozen portfolios, all with kind of, X capital in them, and I want them to look this way. And I want you to achieve a yield each year of X, which is like a benchmark, right? Now think about that for a minute, right? If you have an advisor yourself in your life, most of us, including me and most others, you can't really sit across the table from an advisor and say, here's what I want. I'm only going to pay you 30 basis points to manage my money. And if you don't hit a certain target yield, let's say it's 8% a year, then I'm going to penalize you for that, and you actually have to, pay me back some of the fees that I'm paying you. So I guess for me, when I look at the institutional space, and then I look at the retail space, what I want at the end of the day is I want that institutional-like leverage and power if I'm a retail investor. So what our design is aiming to do is to take that power and influence that today only sits with the large asset owners and really pass that back to a retail investor. And that's a critical point to think about what we're building here, right? So really what I'm saying is that when we're done, I believe everyone is sitting in that room, and myself, will have the leverage that comes with owning an asset, right? And so what does that mean? If I have leverage, instead of paying 100 basis points for someone to manage my money, which is kind of the average of what it costs us nowadays, we can change that dynamic and say, no, we're not paying you 100 basis points anymore. We're only going to pay you 50 or 40 or 35 because the ecosystem really makes you more efficient, but also it creates much more scale on the retail side, and therefore we now have control over the conversation, right? We now steer what what we are willing to pay you to provide us with investment advice and investment management and all this other stuff. So that to me is hugely powerful. But I'll tell you, the most important thing to me is that what I want to be able to do is control my voice, or make sure my voice is heard with regards to any asset I own. So, and I know I made this post on Reddit as well, right? So when I think about a shareholder today, right, we as shareholders, I can't speak for anyone in the room, but I will tell you I have not received a proxy statement or anything like that from a company in a long, long time. And a lot of that has come to be because of these new structures that exist in the financial industry. It started with money market funds, then it moved into mutual funds, and now it's ETFs. What happens in those structures is that as you and I all buy into them, our voices get diluted, right? We no longer have influence over A, what is owned in this portfolio, but B, how the companies that sit within that portfolio behave. To me, personally, I would like the ability to make sure that my social values or my investment values, whatever's important to you, are heard by two constituents, right? A, the investment professional who I hire to manage my money, and B, the end company who's part of that capital pool that I've invested in. So two very, very important things to me that I believe our solution delivers in our ecosystem, where we kind of take this exclusivity that exists within institutional space and really puts that in the hand of retail investors, which really changes this interaction between consumers and the financial industry, but also pulls back this responsibility that the industry has nowadays, where they influence, how companies operate. I'm not sure how many folks are familiar with the concept of ESG, right? Environmental, social, and corporate governance. There is a big part of the industry today that, where there's investors who are trying to shape the way companies operate from a social standpoint, from an environmental standpoint, etc. But a lot of that influence today sits purely with institutional investors. For me personally, I would like my voice to be heard by a boardroom of any company that I own, and therefore I would like the intermediary I hire to manage my money to make sure that they are supporting my values and making my values heard. I'll stop there because I just kind of threw a whole bunch at you. But when we think about this ecosystem, when we think about multi-sided platform, I really want us all to think about things being very different than they are. And it's all achievable with the right design. I believe we'll be in a position where we drive the price that we're willing to pay rather than the market setting the price for us. I think you can do that through scale, and more importantly, it also opens up dynamic access to dynamic products and services. And kind of lastly, it really allows us to take back control of control and influence over any company that we own as part of our portfolio, and make sure that our voices are heard, and then make sure that whoever that intermediary is, who we've given that responsibility to, is actually implementing what we want. So we can do that at scale. We're going to leverage social to kind of make sure we achieve these end results, and I think that's a pretty powerful outcome. I think if you, when we deliver that.
There's just so much depth to Ethos. It's really, really awesome because you're like rambling for like 1.5 hours already, and you have so much more information. We can sit here for like 2 hours, 3 hours, doesn't matter. I'm almost through the questions, and then we're going to open it up for some questions out of the audience. Of course, everybody's dying to know, is there an inside scoop? Is there something you can tell us that nobody has ever heard before? Exclusive. Give us an exclusive, Steve. If you can't tell, that's no problem. But just if there's anything you can say, like all I see is smirks right now. Shingo cut him off. Like, okay, stop right here. We're on to him. If there's anything you can share, just tell us. If not,
first of all, it's like too. Our broader community will actually probably come to my house and lynch me, so I need to be really careful about that.
Yeah, be careful.
But I guess let's try this a little differently, right? Because I mean, you know me, Michael. We don't need to be terribly structured here, so I'd rather just toss the question back at you. Why don't really? I will. Let's not limit any question that you may want to ask about, along the lines of what Michael just asked me. But there's a lot of things that that clearly I know. That we haven't been able to share, and I'm not saying I can share it here, but if there's something if I can add a little color or something, I would do it. There's so much stuff that I don't want to kind of fill in the blank. So I'll toss the question back to you if there's something, that you ask me.
One Lambo. One Lambo. No, I'm sorry, man. Just go. That's all we want to hear. No, but continue.
Did I get my close? Sorry.
Sorry, you can hear me?
Yeah.
Sorry, I interrupted you. Go on. You wanted to toss a question back at us. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay.
So, but I think
heel weinig de laatste antwoord was gewoon nee.
Okay, sorry, so the mic, so you're waiting, so you want the questions from us?
Yes.
Okay, then I'll open it up to the audience. Iemand die wat wil vragen aan Steven, gewoon direct kom maar hierheen en dan geen probleem. Of is alles al beantwoord?
Ja, gewoon meer dan heel veel.
Sorry? Okay. I got a question from the audience. Like, is there any partnerships, current partnerships that you can mention already? Or is that again inside? Because you can't be doing everything alone. Is there anything you can say about that, or?
I can't give you names, but what I can say is this: is that clearly to do anything that we're doing, you can't do it by yourself. And Michael, you're exactly right. So there are several critical partnerships that we need to have. Actually, more than just several, right? So we are where we started in this process is began with the most critical piece that we had to have, and then we kind of moved on from that. And so we are deep into conversations and negotiations with a lot of firms in the space. And I can say this, is that, and I guess I said it indirectly before, our conversations with all of our potential partners who aren't crypto firms are all going extremely smoothly because of the problems that we solve by de-risking ourselves. So it's such a big point to make because a lot of other folks have just intellectual kind of obstacles that get in their way, because of crypto and all this other stuff that we've been able to overcome quite easily. So we do have, let's say 3, if not 4, very, very mature partnership conversations that we're involved in. And, they're all going extremely well. They just haven't been inked yet. But the only thing keeping them from being inked, i.e. signed as contractual relationships, are really just work that we're doing. It's not any sort of sticking issue. So it's the normal process that we're going through. So we're close, very close on 3 or 4, and those 3 and 4 are very major parts of what we're doing. So I'm actually looking forward to sharing them. But I also, why I can't give you names is because if I do, then I'm revealing something that, again, we'll probably see in a white paper in a week or 2. So I don't, I just want to protect against that. It's amazing, and I don't want to badmouth our industry, but the amount of copycats that come out, it's kind of, it's a bit ridiculous, I guess, on one hand, but for us, we got to be very mindful of people trying to rush out there and kind of copy what we're doing. So, but I know I'm not giving you an answer, but I hope you feel you get the sense of confidence that I'm trying to portray here around these things. We have had no red flags in any conversation whatsoever. So I think that is all very, very good for the long-term viability of what we're trying to do here.
That was a great answer. I knew you couldn't give any names, but it's just reassuring that you're working with 3 or 4 mature partners in the field, and we're all dying to hear what those are. I'm going to check for further questions. Je snapt, maar ik kan natuurlijk niet vertellen wie het is, maar het is wel heel tof om te horen dat ze gewoon met al 3 of 4 partijen om tafel zitten en gewoon waarschijnlijk gewoon gigantisch groot nieuws gaan brengen. Verder nog vragen?
Ik kan vragen hoe hij ziet dat Superman veel gedaan heeft voor het team ook, als bedrijf zijnde.
We actually have a Superman spy here. He was wondering, what are your thoughts on him and what he did for Ethos? Because I remember clearly that I talked to Shingo about it, and Shingo didn't even know who he was when he first got into Bitcoin. But you can say what you want about him. Hate him or love him, he did bring a lot of attention to Bitcoin. So, what are your thoughts on that?
I agree, Michael. Right? So, he was an early supporter, and clearly there's a bit of gratitude there from our standpoint, right? Because the most difficult thing in this space is to get your profile out there, right, and to get the word spread quickly. And broadly, right? So from that standpoint, you can't ignore what Suppleman did for Bitcoins and now Ethos. So very, very important. But I think what's the problem that folks, and let's just call them YouTubers, right? The problem YouTubers have now is that people tend to look at them through the lens of kind of the traditional space. And let's be honest, you don't see many people doing what they do as their business model in the traditional security space because regulators would, basically lock them up, right? And I'm not saying that in a negative way towards the YouTubers in the crypto space, but it's two very different spaces. But I think people tend to look at, tend to apply kind of the traditional rules to these folks in this space. And I don't think that's right? Because I actually believe, and I don't mean this in a derogatory way, but the folks like Suppleman and the rest of them are, they're a marketing outlet, right? So I think that's an important role to play in any early stage business, right? And especially when you're, everything in this space is global, right? And you're really trying to have a presence, and a big presence in every region. So how best do you do that? How do you do that, pre-ICO, ICO, or shortly thereafter? Like, how do you really grow your audience? The only way to do that is to do that through what I would call marketing outlets. So I'm appreciative, I guess, to answer your question, appreciative to what the support he gave to us early on and still does. And I think all of that's fantastic. I think where we have to, as investors, where we have to kind of, what we have to understand is that, that there are marketing outlets, right? And there are not. And, and that's the way I see it. Now, personally, and I've said this a million times, I mean, Suppleman and I don't know each other, never spoke to one another. And that's not necessarily for any particular reason, other than the fact that and I think I posted this publicly, strategy is something that sits with me. So therefore, I find, or clearly, I think it's fair to say that there's a lot of sensitive information that sits with me. So therefore, I have to kind of wall myself off from everybody else because I want to be very protective of very, very sensitive information. I think someone reposted this the other day because someone asked me in Telegram about this, but let me give you an example. So what we've done here at Ethos is we actually implemented a trading policy, insider trading policy that we adhere to for anything around Ethos and the Ethos token. I gotta be honest, I haven't heard of any company, or at least a few that have done kind of that same thing. Why is that important, right? When you think about all of these things that are going on, what tends to not be non-existent in our space is that we run through these token sales, we issue tokens get issued, and then there are decent sized pools given to these developers to continue developing the project. Some are transparent if they put everything out on the blockchain, but most aren't. And for us, and me coming from the traditional side of this, I've lived under a policy my entire life. I've never been able to invest freely, ever. In my personal, from a personal investment standpoint, because my employers, it was important to kind of manage that process, right? So we do that same thing here at Ethos because that's the prudent thing to do. That's the ethical thing to do. No matter how bizarre it may sound in our industry today, that's going to become the norm, right? So this is a lot of things that are kind of related to Suppo because, as you guys know, and I don't shy away from these conversations. I get hammered about Suppleman pretty often, right? But my point is simply this: is that from our standpoint, he was a big supporter. We're very appreciative. He's still a very big supporter. Very appreciative. But from our standpoint, he's a marketing outlet, and we leverage him from that perspective. But sensitive information never leaves my lips, as you guys see, right? And I'm walled off from everybody. That means I'm I'm always in this office kind of by myself, I guess. No. So, but it's a lot of information there, but I hope that answers your question. And I'm happy to talk about it more as well.
Yeah, I think Supplement was great for the community. Really got it out there. A lot of people went into following the Bitcoins because of him.
Yeah.
But I really think that people think that he gets some sort of inside scoops, which is not the case that I personally know. Because we don't get them also as product counsel. It's like only need to hear. That's what we get. But he just markets it really well. He's just saying like, I know something, and we already talked about this on Telegram, but he just reads your and Shingo answers like really carefully, and he plucks out like what is important stuff, and he just reads through the lines instead of yelling like when Moon, when Lambo, and all that kind of shit. So I think people give him too much flack for that, and I think he's a great outlet. So.
No, I agree. And I would just say, I've said this publicly as well, right, is that, remember, from our standpoint, it's a marketing element, right? And so, there are, from our marketing team perspective, that is, there's a dynamic there, right, where, we have, asked him for his input on things that are marketing related. So, that makes complete sense. But I want to make, I've said that publicly, and we didn't mention that, but that is, be fully transparent here, right? So, but that is completely realistic, right? So that's the relationship. But I think the most important thing is to understand that the sensitive stuff is walled off, and walled off intentionally. Even though, let's be honest, Shingo and I spend a ton of time in our communities. But as you see, we walk right up to that line where we can give you as much information as possible. And I'll be honest, there's so much stuff that I can't wait to reveal because I'm so excited about it. It's hard for me this is why I often sit here with a big smirk on my face, right? I want to reveal it desperately because it's exciting stuff. But to not be able to share it kind of sucks, pardon my language, right? So, yeah, so, sorry, Mike.
Yeah, no problem. Yeah, one point of view, because you already gave us so much information, and yet can you give a percentage-wise of how much you actually told us?
Aside from things, before I get that yet, the one aspect that I'm being very, very careful with is the social element of our platform. Because that's going to be a game changer combined with all these other facets of our platform, right? So that has me. Again, that's why I don't sleep. It's very exciting stuff. The way we're thinking about finance 2.0, as I put it, right? So, I think we touched on that briefly, but aside, so maybe the answer to that is aside from names, aside from kind of detail on the legal and kind of regulatory structure and things, maybe 75%, if I'm being generous.
Yeah, well, to quote you, you said under promise, over deliver. So what I just took out of your answer was we have a universal wallet that nobody has. We have a low fee gateway. We have a complete and unique way to rebuild our finance and give power to the people, and yet you are calling the social aspect the real game changer.
Yeah.
I don't even want to know how big that's going to be if it encompasses, it overshadows all the rest. It must be so big. Is there anything you can tell us about it? Anything, just not of course giving us exclusives, but there's anything you can share?
Sure. All right. So, I always do this, right? So we actually touched on a couple things. I think that if I draw a straight line correlation, maybe that will help. So, as you know, I come from this institutional space, right? And the benefits to being in this institutional space are vastly different than they are for retail. So what I'll say is we are, and I'll kind of put it in a quote, we are institutionalizing the retail investor. So what does that mean? How do you have this massive thing here and this one little person here. How does this reconcile? Right? This reconciles through social. Right? So through social you can get to scale. Right? Think about that. Right? So if you can get to scale, then you now are on an institutional-like level, which then means that you control the conversation rather than the financial industry controlling the conversation. Because again, I've seen it for 30 years, right? It's a very different dynamic when you think about an institutional capital owner and how they engage their financial intermediaries. They're not beholden to them. It's the other way around, right? So if you think about that, so if I now have the control and the influence over my service provider, right? And let's be honest, that's what the financial industry is. They're a service provider, right? If I have the control over that and influence of that, from a retail perspective, what does that mean? So think about this institutionalizing the retail investor. Think about social. Think about all the things, all the other products and services that we'll have. And I think that should probably allow you to start to connect some dots.
Yeah, it really sounds great, and I already got like a small hint of what you're trying to do there at Ethos. I'm gonna see if there is any last questions, and then we're gonna let you go. One minute.
Yeah, Mike. Maybe one question that you can ask, right? And then come back and we can figure out how to talk about it. But I'd be very interested to understand what we as retail or investors feel about, having this hybrid solution, right? So when you think about crypto connected now to traditional investment and traditional assets, what does that bring front of mind to you? What does that make you feel? What does that make you think about, right? Because for me, it makes me think about a lot of dynamic things, but I'd be interested to kind of get your views.
Okay, well, we don't have vast financial backgrounds, but we're going to check the audience and then we'll come back to you, right?
All right.
Nou, dus even kijken, heeft iemand wat input? Hij heeft het dus over een hybride platform, waarbij je eigenlijk je eigen financiën beheert. Maar niet zozeer gewoon iets met een Rabo-scanner, maar eigenlijk gewoon alles. Dus eigenlijk alles wat hij genoemd heeft, wat heel veel is, het straks gewoon in één app op je telefoon. En nu wil eigenlijk gewoon weten van, joh, hoe denken jullie daarover? Hoe zie je dat? Wat voor beeld heb je erbij? Dus gooi maar, zeg maar.
Ik denk dat het niet zozeer voor ons heel boeiend is om ook te kunnen investeren in bijvoorbeeld goud, olie en andere traditionele assets. Maar dat het wel heel belangrijk is voor de mensen die nu in de traditionele assets investeren en ook naar crypto te trekken, dat het ook een mogelijkheid wordt voor hen. Op die manier.
Nog meer dingen? Hier in de hoek nog wat?
Dat is het.
Ja. So what we got from the audience was not a lot, but when they're looking at this platform, the first thing that pops to mind is not so per se the people who are already in cryptocurrency, but getting the people who are not in cryptocurrency but in traditional stocks, bonds, gold, silver, to the cryptocurrency space and manage it. Because for myself, why buy gold if I can buy Bitcoin? You know, this is my first thought that pops to mind.
Yeah.
Perhaps maybe later on, I want to diversify and buy some gold, but I see it the same way, like getting the traditional space over to the crypto world, to our world. This is what, well, the first thoughts that came to mind.
Yeah, there's a couple things there, Michael, right? It's, so first, yeah, so why do you link them? You have to link them. If you ever aspire to deliver mass adoption, you can't really, if you take crypto by itself, it's the long path to mass adoption. So how do you shortcut that? You shortcut that by linking crypto with traditional, because that's what people know, right? Everyone knows traditional, they understand the engagement, how the CV experience works, what the products look like, etc., right? Now, they also can't stand it, right? They don't like the process. But unless we as crypto introduce the two together, then we're dependent on the traditional space to introduce crypto to the mass audience, right? Right, so I don't want, personally, Shingo, the team, I'd rather not be dependent on the financial industry introducing crypto. I'd rather take control of that timeline, right? And drive that forward aggressively now to really begin to educate the broader audience on crypto and the benefits of it, and even, you know, purely from a portfolio diversification standpoint. If you have everything in traditional, why not have a piece of your portfolio in crypto and vice versa, right? So I think that piece is massively important to taking control over the pathway and timeline to mass adoption, because otherwise we're dependent on, you know, big financial firms who have other interests at play, and personally I don't want to wait for that. I'd rather link them now and then control that progression forward. But more importantly, it's also recognition of the fact that most people, if they even have a retirement plan, most of that sits in a corporate retirement account, right? In some 401k here in the US or something similar somewhere else. And I think I put something out, I don't know if it was this week or last week. It was a chart that I put together about how the mutual fund industry works. Why I put that out, it's motivated, right? So why did I put that out there? Because, you know, I believe the 401k retirement plan experience today is a joke. I mean, I really mean that. I think the options in it stink. I believe the information and knowledge that, you know, kind of that, whether it's your company who offers it or whether it's the plan, the company that manages the plan for that company, the information and knowledge that they give to, you know, actual participants in those plans are non-existent. So I put out this chart about how the mutual fund industry works, how, you know, what the structure is and how everything is connected. I did that, and then, because shortly, either before or after, I put out a chart of the global size of the kind of corporate benefit industry, but specifically the retirement side of that, which is just enormous. I believe our model solves for that by really digitizing that entire space. And because we can digitize that entire space by adding our ecosystem around it, we can enrich that whole entire space and experience for consumers. So traditional is there for many different reasons, but think about that. Think about Ethos being part of that kind of corporate retirement plan structure. Think about us powering that. Think about, you know, really corporations paying for that kind of API service or that will be coming out of Bedrock to help them set up these structures. Think about all of those things, because I will tell you, I know a lot of this sounds complex, and it is, but the model is so clean, it's so simple that you know, it really smooths out a lot of these complexities. So we have a lot of things that we want to achieve and tackle, but the model, because of its simplicity, allows for. Hold on, my wife's looking for car keys. Sorry, guys. Right, so the model unleashes these capabilities that I think are going to be immensely powerful and in high demand, both by consumers, but also you know, corporations from a kind of broad industry perspective.
Again, a lot of information, and it would be really cool managing your own pension fund, because I think we have like 50 people here who are already waiting so they can retire. Try manage it themselves. Yeah, awesome information, and also that because we know that the big money is in the traditional investment branch. So why wait for them? Like for what's the thing called, 500 plus investment side, or something like that, who gives like Bitcoin and Ethereum ETFs. Why not do the same for that? I can already imagine like a one-click diversification. Like I want 10% of my portfolio in rare metals, with so many percentages of gold, silver, diamonds. I don't know what you have in the basket, but that would be so cool. And then on the other side, getting like someone who's already from, okay, I want gold, I want the new gold, so I want some Bitcoin. Like I want gold, silver, Bitcoin. Like that's like another basket. So yeah, it would be awesome if we get like the whole traditional sphere over to Ethos, especially because they all need Ethos tokens. So
that's right. Right, clearly that's something great, right? Yeah, absolutely. More demand we have on the business and developer side, right? The bigger the benefit. So, and that's kind of the great thing about the model. I think, you know, because we, you know, solve so many problems for consumers, but also solve these kind of very structural related issues that have existed in the traditional space for so long. What that does is that, you know, it changes the conversation, the dynamic between us and business customers, right? Because we're not thought of as a threat, right? We're thought as an enabler, right? So if you're thought of as an enabler, both by consumers and by businesses, it changes the dynamic, right? Which makes people come to you rather than you having to go and, you know, sell it, right? So. And that's the point we're getting to, I think, pretty quickly, is I think people are starting to see the potential, and really it's opening up kind of the creative mind within these businesses to say, well, you know, you're making some big claims, let me hear what you have to say, and then when they see it, it starts to really resonate, and I think that to me is kind of indicative of what we're doing. It's also reassurances that you know, our strategy is right. So I feel really good about that. But I want to talk about the regulation piece for a second, Michael, right? So, you know, when we think about the regulatory side of this, for me, I absolutely believe that every company, every stock, every whatever will eventually be on chain, right? I absolutely believe that's the outcome here. Whether that's 10, 15, 20 years, I don't know, right? Because we have, you know, it's a massive piece of work to transition from the existing model to a new one, right? But that is absolutely the end game. That is absolutely where we're going to end up. So, but, you know, another motivation for this hybrid is it's recognition, right? Of saying, all right, we will eventually, everything will be digital, and therefore, you know, by linking these two things now, we start to get everyone more comfortable, but more importantly, transitioning our customers from, you know, to this entirely new digitized space becomes much easier for users on our platform because people are already familiar with it, they're already comfortable, right? So as the industry and the infrastructure shifts to chain, you know, and again, I've mentioned this publicly, I think where we land from a blockchain standpoint is, not necessarily with the industry beholden to Bitcoin, Ethereum, or Dash, or Ripple, or something, right? I think it's an amalgamation of all these things. I think there'll be a big, from an industry standpoint, there'll probably be a lot of private consortium chains, right? Because of the perceived risks about being fully open and transparent. But, there's a lot of things there, but I think ultimately all of that's supportive of a long-term environment and infrastructure that is chain-based, that's open and transparent, and by setting up our model the way it is now, we won't have to react to that change. We're already prepared for that change to occur. So you think about that, right? If you're a Fidelity, you have to, you're gonna have to change a process that you've built over the last 40 years, right? Which is gonna be a massive undertaking. If you're a crypto firm and you're totally crypto, you have to wait for all the traditional side to get there, which could be 10, 15, 20 years, right? So what did we do to recognize that economic value immediately? Link them now. Oops, sorry. So, right, we link them now, and then and that allows us to start to immediately accrue those benefits, right? And then also build an infrastructure and technology platform that can handle both. And then as traditional starts to get overshadowed by the more digitized side of things over the next decade or so, from our perspective, we don't really have to make any changes. So that's a big thing for us too.
Okay, cool. I'm gonna check for one last question. Iemand die nog iets wil vragen?
Ja, heb je met de Ethos nog een paper wallet of een hardware wallet nodig?
Oh, ja.
En zo niet, hoe werkt die beveiliging?
Okay. It was a question about do you need for the universal wallet? Do you actually need like a paper wallet, a hardware wallet, or is there any other innovative way security would be done? Is there something you can say about that? The smirking again.
There absolutely is, and yeah, Shingo's solution there is pretty powerful. So I mean, as he mentioned, right, we're using kind of the BIP32 standard is really kind of the driver for what happens with our wallet, right? And that is very similar to the Nano, the Legend Nano, and others, right? So, but we've accomplished that without needing the hardware side. So you think about the security we all feel. I've got my Nano here too, right? The security we feel with having our hardware wallets. We've been able to create that same level of security without requiring the hardware side of this. But yet we want to be interoperable with existing hardware as well. But so the way we're structuring this is that, you think about that, right? What does that mean if you don't have something in your hand? How do I accomplish that same level of security? So the answer to your question, you can absolutely have your paper wallet, but you're not 100% dependent on it. If you lose your paper wallet, that's fine. We've got you covered, right? And there's some dynamic ways of which we're going to deal with those issues. And again, if you're going to say our goal is to achieve mass adoption, you have to solve that paper wallet issue, right? So Shingo's innovative solution there, I think, is a giant leap forward in regards to how we simplify the process, remove that risk that that we're gonna misplace our paper wallet or something else. So more to follow there. I know Shingo's talked about some of the aspects of it, but he's got you covered for sure.
Goed antwoord? Volgens mij wel, hè?
Ja.
Yeah, I think that's one of the things we need for mass adoption, like losing your paper wallet, losing your key, like my own personal privacy setup is I think it's better than Fort Knox. You're so careful, but then you're talking to people who actually know what they're doing. And if you want my neighbor, my mother to come in and invest, they don't need like dual setup, like splitting papers in half and putting it in one deposit box, and just because they're like panic, they're losing something or getting hacked on Mew, clicking links and stuff. So I know that Ethos will be a service layer over all those things. So even the universal wallet is great, but I know the security and the way you will manage it is even bigger. So yeah, awesome. I'm going to check for more questions. Zullen we nog even één vraag? Is er iemand die nog wat wil weten? We hebben zoveel informatie gehad. Nee, verder niks. You were so comprehensive in your questions that there's like answers. There are no questions left. So thank you very much, Stephen. Everybody who came here already knew that Ethos would be a really big thing in the crypto sphere. We did a coin count just for your information. There are around 50 people here who together hold 1.7 million Ethos tokens. So we're going to leverage that on you. No, but this just shows how invested people really are. And I think after your information today, even for myself, because I know a lot, we have contact regularly, and I'm in the product council, so I see a little bit more than the rest. But even you dazzled me. Like it's so much bigger than I thought, and I'm like 6 months in already. So you did an awesome job. Thank you very much, and a big round of applause for Stephen. Thank you, Stephen.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you all very much. I mean, listen, I want to be really candid. It's this industry to me is special for this reason. So this means a lot to me, and this is community for us. It's community for me. So I'm invested with you guys, and I want you to feel the same, in reverse. So this means a lot to me, and I love this. So this is an open community. I embrace everything about it. So you can hit me anytime you want. Michael knows this. If you have any questions, concerns, whatever it may be, I'm always accessible, and I'll do whatever I can. So really, I appreciate it. Very humbling. So really do. Thank you so much for letting me talk to you for over 2 hours.
Yeah, thanks, Stephen. Thank you very much, and we'll see you soon, okay?
All right, thanks so much.
Bye-bye.
Bye, everybody.